second example, I would recommend you take on this bridge, let your card be pushed, and then you walk up over here. This takes on the angles of the opponent away and makes sure that your team can be able to play in this space because you are able to contest the DPS that would otherwise occupy this area. And you also get chances to flank, you also get chances to play main and to walk up in the corner once the payload is over here. So this position and this rotation just ensures that the card will for sure at least get over here. And then you get chances to flank, you get chances to play main. So this is a very good rotation. Otherwise, you can just play from main once the card is over here and try to get a better resource trade against the opponent tank. For the second point, it is very simple. Usually you should always rotate high ground if you lose the fight. So in both cases, I would recommend going either through this high ground, or in the unranked 2GM I also walked from under to the other high ground. Therefore poking out this top position, because this top position is very dangerous. This is also where we will come back on the defense too. So yeah, you definitely have to clear this position as a Sigma tank. This is your job as a tank to clear the high ground, so your team has all the opportunities to play. For the point, if the payload is over here and you're stuck, as it's very common since this high ground is very hard to take, or like if the card is stuck over here, then you can rotate through this area or flux the high ground in order to get to the high ground here. You can flux, put it here, and then go in the window. That both is fine. Just need to make sure that you take the high ground away from the opponent once more. Third point is very simple. Once the card is over here, you can just either play top or bottom. Both is fine, as long as you're able to put pressure on the card if the opponent tries to touch. Or if you really feel like it, that you need to take away the DPS angles from the high ground, then you can of course stay high ground. Otherwise, it's completely fine. I would recommend on the third point to rotate high ground here. This is a very, very strong rotation, as it once again it takes away the opportunities from the opponent DPS. And there's another way to rotate to the high ground. It is with the jumping here. You can jump onto the, I don't know, crane thing, I guess. Oh, oops, like this. Yeah, sometimes it is. You do need a bit of practice, but it's a very, very good way to get to the high ground. Same way can be done on the other side. So you can jump onto the high ground like this. Yeah, sometimes it's a bit weird mechanic-wise, but should be fine. Yeah, because then it's very important to take high ground once again to occupy the space. Since Sigma is very good at controlling the areas that he plays in, since he has a shield, he has a lot of natural sustain for himself without losing a lot of damage, and without taking damage he can deal more damage because of his resources. Therefore you are able to win a lot of DPS duels if you have the right mechanics for them. So it's very, very good to take away these high ground angles. Additionally, I would recommend if you play over here, you can just play close to the spawn. Usually this is very good once the card is over here, of course. If the card is over there, I would stay high to ground. Usually you should have someone else push the card, because you cannot always do it. Let's talk about the defense. Since I'm already here, I'm gonna start over here. For the third point defense, I would recommend as well to stay top. And you want to stay top until the card is either here, where you should play usually afterwards, is either here or here. Both are fine with natural cover. You're able to go for the backline whenever, and you're able to poke out the high ground here. This is very important if you lose the space. So if the card gets over here, the opponent occupies the high ground, then you need to be able to poke out the DPS that are potentially staying there. Or if the card is over here, this is another case, then you can also stay closer to the doors and poke out these position where the opponent is most likely to walk out from. All of these 4 rooms are very, very threatening to the opponent to walk out, and they need good angles to take the space and walk up. Otherwise, if the card is somewhere over here, you know, it's better to stay off the high ground and give the opportunity to the opponents to walk out, and then make sure that they don't take high ground afterwards. For the second point, it's kind of a similar thing. If the card gets somewhere over here, where this is at, usually what you want to do is you want to play on this high ground here, just making sure that the opponent has a hard time walking up. Someone else should deal with touching the point. This is a common misconception. If you go back to the point, you end up giving up the top space, which ends up losing you a lot of area control. So it's very, very bad to do. One of the more important things on this specific point is if the card is somewhere in this LOS, then you want to stay this high ground, just once again to take away the opportunities from the opponent. And you want to kind of do the same thing here. There's one key tip though on the first point. It is completely out of your hands. You don't want to peek too much up front in this position. I see a lot of Sigma players, what they do is they keep poking this position. This plays into the opportunity of the opponent. They have the better spawn right now. The payload is being pushed to this point anyway every time. So peeking into this just gives more opportunities to the opponent. So usually what I find is you want to peek for a bit and then end up going over here, signaling your team that you want to fight in this corner. What this does though is you only have one fight, as you don't really get to recontest, but this is completely alright usually. So this position is just so strong. It's hard for all of them to walk up. You have all the space in the world. The only potential threat is if a Widowmaker takes right side, but you can figure out if you want to deal with that or if you want to have a flanker deal with that. Both is fine as long as you control the area in this, like what I'm looking at. This area is very important to control. If you hold too early, you might force your team to peek into the opponent's angles, and then you might be ending up getting entry picked and not even being able to get a fully regrouped fight again, since you're gonna die one by one and the opponent has an easier time walking into this area that I just marked. So this is one of the few things on Junkertown that I'll always keep in mind. Let's go to Havana now. Oh, why did I do that? Went back. Wait 1 second, I have a preset. Alright, let's go to Havana. Let's start with Havana. Here's the kind of same thing. It is very, very weird to understand, but you don't really want to peek into the opponent here if you... Oh wait, let me start defense. Okay. We have attack here. So the very first thing you want to do is poke out the opponent over here. There's two ways you can play this. If you really want to go for it, you can hard flank and go to high ground. I don't recommend this, but this is a possible play as it takes away the opponent angles if they have so much pressure on this walkout. But usually your team has better opportunities here, so you don't really have to do that. The most important thing you have to focus on is winning the resource trade with your better cooldowns and better rotation against the opponent's Sigma on this map, because you're gonna face the Sigma mirror here a bunch of times once you get to a certain elo. So it's very important to be able to break out this position. Afterwards, what you can do is you can either go very close here once you win the fight, and the opponent has to walk up to early occupy this area, so you easily take away the opponent's chances to get a trade back, and you're able to control both of the angles that the opponent DPS could potentially take, while also playing with natural cover and giving your team all the open space to play with. So this is usually very good. Otherwise, I would recommend just slowly poking out of here. There's no other choices you have. You kind of need to play to win the resource trade on this part of the map. But this is why a lot of people struggle on first point, because they are very unaware that is the kind of the only way. Second point, you want to rotate to the high ground here always. I don't recommend going left side here. It is sometimes alright. It depends on the situation, of course. If you have someone pushing card like a tracer, then you can do it. Otherwise, I would just try to take this high ground here. This is very strong anyway. Once you win the fight, it takes away the opponent's opportunities once again, and you're able to force the opponent to play over there, which is very, very bad LOS for them, since your DPS can just hug this wall here, and it's very hard for them to be cleared. And you can always push the card forever in this angle, and you're able to go for the backline or for Widowmaker here in potential cases. As long as you don't overpeak here and you don't get yourself forced out, this is a very strong position to be in. Third point is very simple. Once again, you want to win the resource trade. You have to be very careful walking up here, because this LOS is very long and it also plays into the Widowmaker sideline. So when the opponent has a Widowmaker, you want to make sure that you rotate with your team together. You can do that by waiting for your team in natural cover and saying 3 to 1, shielding the team over. You can shield the Widowmaker. Once you shielded the Widowmaker for a bit, dropping the shield, and then you want to win the resource trade in this position. Getting to this position is very strong. Furthermore, if you end up being over here, this is also a position where people struggle against, just because it's so tough for your backline to walk up, because there's so many angles the opponent can play from. Like an example, high ground here, maybe inside the room they can have someone. They had just a lot of pressure on this walk up position, and it usually ends up getting you split if you walk in too far. What you can do is hug the wall a bit, play under, or go for go for a flux on top, which clears the area, so your team has one less angle to worry about. So this is like the 4 things that I would look out for. The other thing is, and this is one of the very important ones on defense, you want to make sure that you occupy the high ground at first. Usually playing on high ground is very good, as it signals your team that you want to fight for the card to be over here. Fighting when the card is here and you go over here just makes it awkward for your teams, because they have very bad angles to play into, while the opponent can occupy the open space in main. So you give up the chance of a good defensive hold if you fight too fast or fight too far up. Similar, if the card is over here, I would recommend playing in this position, as it's very good to poke out the opponent. Playing over here just gets you split from your own team, as the opponent is able to shield your team off and then go for you. So I wouldn't recommend it. This angle is more for like a DPS player. This angle is only good if the card is somewhere here, but even then, I would still prefer to play over there, let the card be pushed to a certain extent. Spawn hold is very uncommon, especially with the changed spawns, now that in Overwatch 2 the spawns changed. So it's way harder to spawn hold someone, but this used to be a strategy that you could just go close to the spawn and just hold this area. So you might find that in one game this might be useful information. For the second point, it's very important to hold this high ground. I know it is very, very uncommon to say this, but this high ground just basically prevents the opponent from walking into the bridge here, onto the bridge. So the opponent would be forced to walk outside here, and then you're still able to play this high ground over here. So usually playing this high ground here is very, very strong on defense. I would, like, even on all the positions where the card could be, I would still hold this high ground usually all the time. The first point is very simple. Again, you have no other option but to win the resource trade. One very important fact though is how you take away the space and how you give your team the best opportunities. I know a lot of times people play for the Widowmaker angle in here, but you can, or like if your DPS are top, you cannot peek like this though. If you peek like this, you will end up losing resources and you force your team to walk into the opponent's LOS. What is better is to let the opponent peek over here and then win the resource trade like this and just control these kind of areas here. Control the inside, control this area, and don't even peek into this, because there's no reason to. Usually you should give your team opportunities. As long as you have this kind of off angle, you signal your team, you can give them opportunities for them to re-peek. An example, if you have your Widow and you need to go back because you're losing a lot of cooldowns, going back over here or going back over here is the only option for you. But then you can have your flanking Widow at least, like if she's over here, that the opponent has to walk onto you and then she gets good LOS on them, or if she's on high ground then she can get good LOS onto the opponent. So you have very, very much opportunities, rather than if you peek into the opponent team, as your supports don't have that much enjoyment peeking with you into this LOS. As you can see, it's just a very, very niche position and not really preferable to play into. Let's go into the last map here. I did it again. Did it again, man. Let's go into the last map. The last map is Circuit Royale. The last map is Circuit Royale. One of the, in my personal preference, best Sigma maps, if not the best Sigma map overall. There was usually only once, or like, it depends, you know, on this map, a lot of people argue that Sigma was not necessarily always meta, while that is certainly very true, because there can be dive and brawl played here to some extent, because it's very hard to walk up in these positions because you have so much corner control and so little chances to get angles with the spam matchup that sometimes it's hard to break the brawl composition. But usually in ranked, you always find that you cannot really make brawl work here, just because it needs too much coordination, and that can never be granted in ranked. So it was always more of a niche strat rather than a ranked meta strat. So I'm giving you this advice. I would always recommend playing Sigma here if you play ranked. In a scrim environment or like somewhat close to a tournament environment, I would think about, you know, maybe holding close with Ramatra is also a good idea. We saw Mauga here meta on the Overwatch CS finals, but to be fair, as I said, it's just very hard to walk up into these angles for your DPS, not for the Sigma. So this is like kind of the reason why Brawl can be played here over Sigma. But in ranked, always Sigma was better. To start us off on attack, what you want to do is you want to win the resource trade. You don't want to peek too early into this. You want to wait until someone at least is ready to walk up and your team is ready to swing around the corner. So once the card is over here and you see your team is ready to walk up, you just 3-1 and you walk up. And then once that happens, you want to try to take this high ground. This high ground is very, very strong to take, as the only mission is to get the opponent DPS to not be able to look at this angle anymore. So taking this high ground here just forces them away. This is very, very strong. You gotta be, it's a bit risky, but as long as you have the right timing for it and you wait for your team to be able to LOS you as well so they can heal you up or pressure the opponent so you have a much easier time walking up, then it should be fine. So taking this high ground here is super strong, and then once the card is over here, you do the same thing again. You walk 3-1, you walk up with your team, make sure you all peek together, and here's the same thing. You just make sure that your opponent or your DPS are able to walk into this area, and then once they do, you walk up with them. You know, and meanwhile you can poke out your position without losing your shield cooldown. So that will be very important. For the second point, it is very, very hard to cross this area. I know a lot of people struggle here. The best thing you can do is just make sure that you walk up together, you poke out this top position, and then you're rotating, not through here. A lot of people go here, but this is just not a good position. This should be like a Genji position or someone for your Tracer, an example, to take to force away the angle. Usually you want to play over here and just poke out the opponent from here. It's also fine to flux this area to make sure that your team rotates, and we will get to that on defense, how to counter that. So then we want to just play to get the resource trades. When you have the space here, the opponent dies, and you're waiting for the card to be over here, usually it's preferred to play over here. This is a very good position, as it's hard for the opponent to walk into you. In the unranked 2GM, I'm pretty sure I played here at one point, but that is a different case just because I wanted to have a different angle. You know, either is once again fine, but I would recommend rather playing to your team's LOS if the opponent also have a Sigma, since you don't want to leave him to be able to poke out your backline, therefore splitting you. This would not be optimal. Third point is very, very important rotation. In the unranked 2GM, I actually fell off the high ground because of a lag, but usually I would recommend going, if the card is over here and you're stuck in this position, you need to clear the opponent high ground once again to take away their angles. So it's very good to rotate over here, take away the high ground, make sure you poke out the opponents that I could potentially spam here. You also get opportunities here. You don't want to play this LOS though. If you play here, you're very likely to get splits at this position because your teammate will not be able to cross through here. So it is very, very common for you to be stuck in this position. So what is better is to actually rotate through the high ground, take the time, tell your team, yo, I'm taking time, can someone else go top with me? And then you force away all of the opponent's angle and that you're able to capitalize on the space. Very, very important like rotation. It takes away the angles from the high ground and it makes it be less pressure on this position, even though you are not the one pushing card with the shield, right? Leaving your team to be peeking the opponents in the open to push card. But this is very, very important. It has always been meta and it's the best rotation on Sigma. On defense, you know, it's kind of a similar case. You can either play slow in these kind of areas or hold the high ground. I would recommend holding the high ground. I find it to be very good because the opponent Sigma has to mirror it at one point anyway. The only reason to go card is if the opponent Sigma is going card, so you can mirror him on card. You know, that's fine on defense, but otherwise I would be holding high ground. And you can always go for backline as well in this defensive position. So if you're holding card, the opponent's playing over here, you know someone is going to touch, then you can drop on the backline, you split the opponent's Sigma that is in pushing card, and you just win the fight. So it's just very important to be holding the high ground. Here it's kind of the same case, you know, if the card is over here and you want the fight as a defensive position, I like to hold this there just because it puts pressure on both of the choke points the enemy could walk out from, and it gives you an off angle and your team a position to play with, so you have additional pressure on this position and they can't really clear one angle by shielding it or by holding, like walking with natural cover, or by poking the position out. So they have to poke out two positions in order to walk up. This is a very strong hold. So yeah, if the card is over here and you want the defensive fight and the opponent has to walk out of spawn, then you're able to hold here. Very, very strong. The next position here is very simple, explained. You know, usually I would always recommend holding over here, leaving your team for the angle on main. You know, you're able to poke here, you're able to control this, you're able to control here, and you're able to walk up fast into the opponent. For the next position here, if the card is somewhere along the lines of here, holding here is very strong. You don't want to over peek into this position losing your shield early, but it's very strong to make sure that you have some kind of poke and kind of set up, because this walk up is very long and very hard for the opponent to walk through. So it's very common for the opponent to struggle to walk up in this position. For the third point, is very simple. You want to play over here once you lose the space on high ground. Otherwise, I would recommend starting over here. This is a very good position to start into, because you're able to poke out close range. A lot of people start closer, but this is very, very bad, since you take away your opportunities from your team and you make yourself too vulnerable too early on, since you're gonna get pressured out, and once you're pressured out, you cannot control the space and give the opponent Sigma an easy rotation on the high ground. So it's better to play it used to be the Lamborghini, but now I guess this is a Mercedes-Benz. I don't know. What is this? Yeah, but like this car, right? It's just very good. It gives you a lot more natural cover than the Lamborghini did. So yeah, pretty good. And then you go back, just play slow. You can play either here or on the high ground. I would recommend playing over here, signaling your team that they should go somewhere over here to be able to LOS this corner and make sure that you have pressure on this position. Yeah, and then for the third point, it's kind of the same thing here. You wanna win the resource trade over here. So that covers all the 3 maps, and I hope you have fun in the Unranked 2 GM. I know this was the longest introduction yet, but I found it to be very, very important, as Sigma has a lot to do with rotations and right decision making on these maps, because as I said, Sigma has always been meta on these maps, and I will guarantee you, if you make sure that you have these kind of rotations and that you're playing the way I said, you will be ending up getting a lot of wins. So I hope you're having fun with the Unranked 2 GM.